All right, it's 12 o'clock on June 9th, 2020, and we are here for ACMT Grand Rounds. Thank you all for joining us. By way of quick housekeeping, for future topics, if there are any of particular interest to you, please send me an email. It helps me immensely to get a sense of what other people are interested in. Otherwise, topics are going to be only my interests. And if you hear a great lecture or nowadays a Zoom lecture, please feel free to send me that lecture, and I can reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to come for ACMT Grand Rounds. Otherwise, I think everybody's getting pretty savvy now with WebEx and Zoom meetings. So in WebEx, just make sure that after you've raised your hand and you've had a question answered, please drop your hand because I can't drop your hand and I'm not sure if you have a follow-up question. As Dr. Franco Corso is presenting, if you have any questions you want to enter into the chat box, please feel free to do so, and I'll make sure that they get addressed before the end of the WebEx. And I think that's about it. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Sylvia Franco Corso. She's a psychiatrist at Columbia University who I was privileged to listen to a presentation of hers at New York Society of Addiction Medicine this past year, and I thought it was fantastic, and I thought it was very relevant to toxicology community. So I've asked her to come give that presentation again here today. So, and she's been very generous with her time to do so. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Franco Corso.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Can you all hear me well?
We can.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thank you for the invitation. And I'm going to start talking today about classical psychedelics and a little bit of focus on the treatment of addictions. That is my area of interest. So there's a lot of stigmatization in this area because there's a fine line between science and shamanism. So my interest again lies in applying the scientific method and try to explore the potential use of psychedelics in psychiatry in the area of addictions. So many psychedelics are present in nature and have a long history of traditional use in different cultures all over the world. This one is a mushroom man painting in the caves of Sahara. Sorry, all of this is thousands of years before Christ. So this one is a mushroom painting in a cave in the Sahara that are proof of the relationship between human and psychedelics in these ancient populations of the Sahara. These are the Mayan mushroom stones, initially considered to be phallic representations, but the current consensus is that the mushrooms reflect the evidence of the psychoactive mushroom use in Central America. And here we see a carving in a temple site in Peru of a fungi-clawed shaman that holds this cacti that is a San Pedro cacti that contains mescaline. In here we can see a shaman brewing ayahuasca, which is also used in their ceremonies all over the Amazon. This is not per se a psychedelic, but priests in Egypt would use the lotus flower because it has mild psychoactive effects. And here also not a psychedelic, but coca leaves are a substance that are vital part of the religious cosmology of the people in the Andes. They sometimes use it before going to meditation and prayer, but they also use it as a stimulant to overcome fatigue, hunger, thirst, and is particularly effective against altitude sickness. And also use substances with psychoactive effects. So here we see the lemurs in Madagascar. They use these millipedes that they secrete benzoquinone, which acts as an insecticide, but also to cleanse themselves from parasites. But this secretion also acts as a narcotic, and this lets the lemur to salivate profusely and enter a state of intoxication. Reindeers in the north of Asia and in the north of Europe, they also go to great lengths to seek this hallucinogenic mushroom, the Amanita muscaria. And when they eat the mushroom, they start behaving drunkenly, like running aimlessly, making strange noise. So the shamans in the north of Asia and Europe, the reindeer herders, They also have shamans there, so they would use this mushroom, but it can be toxic. So what they figured out was when the reindeers ate the mushroom, they would collect their urine, and the reindeers would kind of filtrate all these toxins, but the urine still had psychoactive properties of the mushrooms. So they had fewer negative effects after drinking the urine of the mushrooms. I don't know if this is true, what I'm going to say, but there's a theory proposed by a mycologist in 1950s that he said that the origin of Santa and Christmas can be traced to this and the flying reindeers can be traced back to this tradition. So you see people and man and beast alike, hallucinated with this kind of mushrooms. They have the particular red and white color. They have the winter solstice celebrations. Um, these mushrooms usually appear under the trees, and sometimes in the north of Scandinavia and Northern Europe, they have the tradition to the Christmas decoration use mushrooms. So this is a theory. I don't know if it's true, but I just thought it was pretty interesting. There's many other animals, but one last example is the dolphin that it uses the pufferfish. And even though it has a neurotoxin like the tetrodotoxin, in low doses it can induce a trance-like state. And scientists, zoologists found a group of young dolphins experimenting with one of these pufferfish. They would chew the pufferfish gently and pass it around among them. Began acting peculiarly, hanging around with their noses at the surface as fascinated by their own reflection. In human and modern history, this early scientific research was this guy, Arthur Heffter, who isolated mescaline from the peyote cactus. But it was not until 1938 when they started having there was more interest in this psychedelic substance. This guy is Albert Hoffman, and he discovered LSD. So what happened is that LSD is derived from the ergot. That is LSD is derived from the ergot. And the ergot is a fungus that typically grows on the rye, and it can cause ergotism. And it also has some properties, like it has vasoconstriction and causes gangrene of the fingers and toes, the ergotism. So Sandoz, the pharmaceutical, was exploring potential medications that would get from this ergot. And they thought maybe the vasoconstriction properties will be useful in postpartum bleeding. And then Albert Hoffman, a chemist, was exploring this ergot fungus. And when he got to the 25th combination, he realized that the 25 didn't really have any effect in what they were looking for, so he shelved it. But 5 years after, he got a hunch that he was missing something. So what he did was he wanted to explore this substance again. And when he was preparing a new sample to resubmit it, his skin got accidentally, or he accidentally absorbed a small amount of LSD, and he experienced the world's first trip. He decided to try it again, and he had an assistant to help him. And he tried. He got intoxicated, and he started feeling a little bit high, and he started having panic. So he went home in a bike, and he thought that he had poisoned himself because ergot can be deadly. So he got to the home. He was very panicky. He called the doctor, and the doctor said that he was fine. His vitals were fine. There was no physical abnormality. So he felt better, and then he started experiencing the psychedelic experience in a more relaxed way. So he wrote here, everything in my field of vision wavered and was distorted as if seen in a curved mirror. I also had the sensation of being unable to move from the spot. Nevertheless, my assistant later told me we had traveled very rapidly. The horror softened and gave me a way to a feeling of good fortune and gratitude. Now, little by little, I could begin to enjoy the unprecedented colors and plays of shapes that persisted behind my closed eyes. Kaleidoscopic, fantastic images surged in a moment. So, of course, Sandoz, Sandoz marketed this as deliseed. on one hand, so the psychiatrist could experience the world of psychotic patients and also as assisting therapy. Oh, and that the people that are into this, they celebrate April 19th, the Bicycle Day, uh, to memorize Albert Hoffman. So anyway, in 1950, the CIA was also interested in these substances. They wanted to develop a true drug, but there were a lot of scandals. They would give the drugs, LSD, to people without their consent, um, and there were a lot of like scandals, and they didn't find it to be particularly effective, this drug as a true drug, so they stopped this project. And in 1959, the same guy that discovered LSD-25, he isolated uh, psilocybin from the magic mushrooms in Mexico, and of course, Sandoz marketed it as indocybin. So this indocybin and delicid were used for the psycholytic and psychedelic therapy. Psycholytic was mostly in Europe, where they used low doses to deepen the psychodynamic therapy, and psychedelic in US they would use high doses leading to mystical experiences. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And then in 1953, these two psychiatrists, they thought, okay, maybe if we use these substances to induce a delirium tremens-like experience, the people with substance use disorder would get scared and would never do drugs again. But they realized that people actually felt nice, they enjoyed it, they saw strange things, so they changed their approach and attempted to make their subject have a good transcendental experience that would help them relate to their drinking. Bill Wilson, founded of AA, Alcoholic Anonymous, he took LSD under the guidance of this psychiatrist, and he before had done belladonna. And he credited his mystical experience with belladonna to have played a role in his recovery from severe alcohol use, and debilitating depression. And he thought maybe LSD could help treat addiction by injecting profound insight in connection to a higher power that he experienced. But Alcoholic Anonymous strongly opposed to member experimenting with mind-altering substances. Oh, this is Arthur Hefter. This is Humphrey Osmond. Sorry, Abraham Hoffer, Humphrey Osmond, and this is Bill Wilson. So then the prohibition came. So not all researchers took into account set and setting. They would sometimes give drugs with patients that were like restrained. It got a little bit out of hand. Psychiatrists and other non-trained people were like holding LSD parties. Then the 60 counterculture movement were basically this turned into this. And around that time, there was the thalidomide crisis where babies were born with malformed limbs. So Richard Nixon, he declared the 1970s Controlled Substances Act, where they scheduled 6 psychedelics into the Schedule 1, meaning that it has no medical use, it's very unsafe with high potential for abuse. So all research was stopped. So where does this working from psychedelic? Hallucinogen is a more like an umbrella term, and then it doesn't really describes the full of the psychedelics. So this guy is Aldous Huxley. He wrote The Doors of Perception or A Brave New World, and he communicated with this psychiatrist, Humphrey Osmond, and he told him, okay, why don't you come up with a good name for these substances? And they exchanged some letters. He wrote, to make this trivial world sublime, take half gram of part at a time. Finance meaning to reveal, and thymos means soul. And then the psychiatrist replied, to fathom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic. Psych meaning mind, and delos meaning manifest. So this kind of properly describes the expanding consciousness from these substances. So again, hallucinogen is more like an umbrella term, and it includes a lot of substances, and classical psychedelics are a smaller group of substances, indoleamines, phenylethylamines, like LSD, ibogaine, DMT, mescaline, DOI. There are different categories, but this one that I see most commonly. Then MDMA is not a psychedelic, but it's a hallucinogen somehow, and it's called in the groups of entactogenic phenylethylamines, or also called empathogens, because it has prosocial effects. sociability, empathy, usually devoid of the hallucinatory component. And another hallucinogens are the dissociatives like PCP, ketamine, and salvia. We're going to talk more about these ones, the classical psychedelics. I don't want to go much into detail in here, but just to note, you see all these psychedelics are structurally very similar to serotonin, but through this chemical reaction, the tryptamine is going to turn into serotonin. Neither tryptamine or serotonin are hallucinogens or have psychedelic properties, but a small chemical modification of the tryptamine is going to yield four psychedelic molecules: DMT, 5-methoxy-DMT, psilocybin, and bufotenin, which is found in the skin of toads. So they all look pretty similar to the serotonin. Also LSD, which is synthetic. And with that in mind, you can understand why they work mainly through serotonin receptors, specifically the 5-HT2A mostly, and then giving the receptor antagonist ketanserin actually going to abolish all the effects. LSD has a little bit of more pleiotropic mechanism of action involving dopamine, glutamatergic receptors, etc. But even though psychedelics can indirectly increase dopamine in the striatum, they fail to activate the nucleus accumbens, which is the involved in reinforcement, reward, and addiction. And they also, through acting during sigma 1 receptors and serotonin receptors, they increase the expression of neurotropic factors like induced neuroplasticity. And sometimes abnormalities in neuroplasticity contribute to the pathophysiology of a lot of psychiatric illnesses. To understand a little bit more the psychological effects, it's important to know what the default mode network is, but this also has biological basis. This is kind of like a popular term. The default mode network is a web of interconnected regions that are activated by default when you're not focused on any particular task. So kind of when your brain's on autopilot or daydreaming, you're trying to fall asleep and your mind is just wondering about the past, about the future, etc. So this is still a work in progress, but it seems that an hyperactive default mode network it can be problematic, right? So people with depression, people that are anxious, they have like constant ruminations and negative self-referential activity. They try to suppress the default mode network, but they're unable. It's hard for them to break off from that inner dialogue. And what psychedelics do is that, and this is seen in the fMRI, they dampen the activity of main core structures of the default mode network, medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex. So they dampen the activity of these default mode network hubs. So they acutely decrease the activity of the default mode network, and they kind of like reset the activity. In here, we can see in the researchers at the King College of London, they use magnetoencephalography to see the brains in the communications during normal state in psychedelics. And they see here the brain's various network kind of like talk mostly to themselves with relatively few heavily trafficked paths. Like the default mode network, always like it's the same path communicating with the main hubs. And in here, we see a brain on psilocybin. So the main connector hubs shut down of the default mode network, and this leads to an abundant novel communications. So think about if they're in a big city and then you shut down a major highway, the drivers have to deviate from their normal routes and often find themselves in unfamiliar territory, but they usually can get to their destination, but after a more lengthy or interesting trip. So the major hubs are not available. So there's a lot of new connections, and there's a lot of more crosstalk between areas of the brain that wouldn't normally communicate. So this also explains synesthesia, right? Hearing the colors, seeing the sounds, etc. And when you experience reality in a different way, that's how you get new insights. So when the activity is reduced in the default mode network, our ego shifts from the foreground to the background. So this shift in awareness is very important, among the most important experiences, because the people feel more connected to a world greater than themselves. They feel they share humanity. They see if, for example, they have addiction, they see how have they, how are they hurting others. And this sense of spirituality and unity with nature and with others, indigenous communities have known for thousands of years. Um, so this experience is normally known as the mystical experience. It sounds like a hippie concept, but it's actually a psychometrically validated scale that describes the main psychological experiences during experience, and it's feelings of unity that is becoming one with persons, nature, etc. Transcendence of time and space, feeling that you're outside of time, beyond past and future. Noetic quality, which means you feel that this is an ultimate reality, more real than everyday reality. Feeling that this is what your experience is sacred, that feeling a deeply felt positive mood and joy and bliss. Ineffability means that it's difficult to put in words what you are experiencing. And paradoxicality means you're experiencing paradoxical feelings, like I was dead, but I've never felt more alive, things like that. So the intensity of the mystical experience actually predicts the therapeutic effects. So in the studies, when people have higher mystical experiences scores, this is correlated with the improvement of whatever they're measuring, depression, anxiety, etc. And after the psychedelic experience, there is something called the afterglow, which is several weeks after using this, there's a positive phase characterized by elevated mood, um, increased openness to therapeutic intervention, and much of the insights gained during the psychedelic experience can become integrated during this moment. So facilitating therapy during this moment is crucial to maintain the effects and the integrate the insights you had during the psychedelic experience. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, in terms of addictions, uh, even though there are a lot of treatments, drug overdose continues to rise, mostly because of fentanyl, and for example, cocaine too, because it can be tampered with fentanyl. And a lot of people focus in just treating the addiction, right? Treating how many drinks you had this day, or how many months have you been abstinent, etc., etc. And in addictions, a lot of people have, when you treat the addiction, you're just treating the tip of the iceberg, well, while neglecting these unseen elements that contributed to the development of substance use disorder. Trauma, feeling of emptiness, yeah, lack of social, lack of a community. A lot of people, when they're aware of this, this is painful, and they use thought suppression strategies like using substances in order to cope with the distress. They attempt to fill this void through substance consumption or through acquisition of, you know. So rather than escaping this void, strategies like meditation or psychedelics posit that is within that void where the transformative insight can be generated. That feeling of voidness can become like a raw material for psychotherapeutic change. So in terms of psychedelics, I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of them. So ayahuasca is a psychedelic brew used for centuries in the Amazonian tribes. When the Christian missionaries came, they kind of its use, but it still remains nowadays as a sacrament. And there's actually some churches that combine both elements of Christianism and ayahuasca sacraments. So, because there's a lot of interest from Westerns to use this substance, and there's a lot of increase of like shamanic tourism. So scientists are exploring more this substance to see their effects. So ayahuasca is a group combined by the vines of the bee caapi and the leaves of this Psychocha viridis. The bee caapi has the chemical beta carbolines, and the P. viridis the chemical DMT. So the DMT is not orally available because the beta carbolines, which are because the MAO enzyme normally uh, it, inhibits this DMT and doesn't let the stomach do up. So the beta carbolines provide the chemical MAO inhibitors. It inhibits the MAO, the DMT is absorbed, and then it can go to the brain to exert its psychedelic effects. The ayahuasca lasts about 6 hours. It has a lot of like GI side effects, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting. That's why it's known as the purge. But on one hand, this helps with the, it's had anti-addictive properties that is very useful if you're in the middle of the jungle. And on the other hand, this represents like the release of negative emotions. It has visual, auditory distortions and psychological effects. For example, this person described it as facilitates a state of deep introspection that promotes reflection on personal issues. I just want you guys to know that the people in ayahuasca with several other plants like Brugmansia, Nicotiana rustica, which is the one that it's a tobacco that where the rapé is derived from, Justicia pectoralis, and Mimosa hostilis. So there are a lot of mixtures. And maybe I just want to mention about Brugmansia. So Brugmansia is it's a flowering plant that contains the tropane alkaloids scopolamine, uracil, atropine. So in small doses, it can actually help with this nausea, motion sickness of the ayahuasca, but in higher doses, has psychoactive effects. So, but also in higher doses, it can be toxic. So the shamans and fake shamans, because they have this pressure of the Westerns that come there to have these spectacular psychedelic experiences. So sometimes they combine more doses than they should, more plants than they should, and there's also like a lot of fake shamans out there. So this actually can create a lot of side effects and psychosis and death. So low doses is okay, but sometimes it's mixed in a way that can be dangerous. Anyway, these other plants are also mixed. DMT, as it's not orally available, people can inhale the smoke and inject it, and it's very short duration, like 15 minutes. So that's why it's called the businessman trip. And some people describe it as very visual. Someone described it as feeling of being violently catapulted into space, seeing intense visions of magnificent otherworldly beings, beautiful patterns, and bizarre landscapes. It's just that depict like the visual effects of DMT. The mescaline, which is found in the peyote cactus and the San Pedro cactus. The peyote, you kind of like chop that button and they dry it, and they either chew the bottom, but because it's bitter, they can also grind it and put it into capsules. Used by natives in Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, and a characteristic is that visually it has some, give me a second, visually it has patterns like stripes, checkboards, etc., that are kind of like geometrization of three-dimensional objects that appear like a cubist painting. So these are some paintings inspired. This is a cubist painting, but these are like paintings inspired by mescaline experiences. Psilocybin is found in the magic mushrooms, over 200 species of mushrooms, and it has mind altering effects pretty similar to LSD, mescaline, DMT. And I wanted to know what's the difference between psilocybin and LSD. So I looked online and someone described it in a very interesting way. Mushrooms are for setting your roots. LSD is for spreading your branches. So usually it does not create hallucinations. It creates illusions. So it kind of changes what's there. It creates kind of like distortions of what is already there. And usually people have insight that is caused by the drug. LSD, again, derived from this fungus, from the ergot, and it's very powerful. Just one drop that the size of 1/10 of a grain of sand is a powerful psychedelic. They use it in sugar cubes, blotter papers, gummy bears, and it lasts a long time, like 12 hours. Because the LSD is a very big rigid molecule, so serotonin, when it acts in is kind of like it's cleared in seconds, but LSD hits the receptor in an angle that it forms a lead and it's trapped there and it fires long time, um, a different pathway than the serotonin. So ibogaine is mostly from Central Africa, used by the Pygmies before, but it reached Europe around around 1900. Um, in low doses, it's a stimulant, and in higher doses, it's more like a psychedelic experience. Um, and the effects can be really long, like 36 hours. It can be grounded and then using pills. So general safety, there are a lot of side effects like nausea, loss of appetite, etc. But there are no the several expert consensus of the relative harms of various psychoactive drugs are consistent in finding the serotonergic psychedelics, ibogaine is not included here, towards the least harmful end of the spectrum, of both legal and illegal drugs. So in healthy humans without pre-existing medical conditions, the cardiovascular effects like hypertension or tachycardia are not expected to cause serious complications, but they shouldn't be used in people with cardiovascular conditions. Their perspective of physiological toxicity, again, not this serotonergic, but not ibogaine here. Um, they are not associated with major organ system damage, carcinogenicity, teratogenicity, or enduring neuropsychological effects or deficits or overdose deaths. But the impaired judgment or reckless behavior while on psychedelics can be problematic. It can be psychologically distressing and cause bad trips. But during these experiences, people usually retain insight that their symptoms are related to the drug ingestion, and they resolve just by providing interpersonal support. And sometimes this can have a positive therapeutic balance. Um, it does not have any compulsive drug seeking tachyphylaxis. It doesn't have withdrawal symptoms, and animal studies also have failed to demonstrate that there's a rewarding potential of psychedelics. Even though they can produce psychotic-like experience, several studies, prospective studies and retrospective studies have shown that people that use psychedelics are not at increased risk of developing, schizophrenia, bipolar, but they can exacerbate psychosis in individuals with psychotic spectrum illness, right? Someone with bipolar, someone with schizophrenia. And if you have family history of schizophrenia or bipolar, then you should not use this medication because it puts you at risk. Um, there are a lot of interactions. Antidepressants usually increase serotonin, so you don't want to mix them because you're at increased risk of serotonin syndrome, although it's rare. If you use ayahuasca, you should not use MAOIs because then you're at increased risk of having, like high blood pressure, because ayahuasca also has MAOIs. Avoid foods containing tyramine like aged cheeses, wine, etc. that also are going to increase blood pressure because MAO metabolizes tyramine. So if you inhibit the MAO, then there's going to be increased tyramine in causing high blood pressure and all that. There's a lot of interactions of these over-the-counter supplements, and I do want something kind of cool is that there's some people called the psychonauts, and they are like the astronauts, but they are interested in um, exploring their altered states of mind. So they use different drugs to explore this, and they know a lot about chemistry, and they have all these combinations and even more of how to combine these drugs, how are they synergistic, etc. So psilocybin plus MDMA is hippie flipping, a lot of combinations. Psilocybin plus dextromethorphan is cherry flipping. If you add like cocaine, it's called on string. So LSD plus MDMA is candy flipping on string. Psilocybin plus MDMA is hippie flipping on string. So although relatively the psychedelics themselves appear to be relatively safe, uh, there are a lot of combinations that can make them potentially, dangerous. And these psychonauts, they know a lot about chemistry. They use other drugs, psychedelics like I've never heard of, like LSD, 2CB, 2C2, 2CT, 6-8PV, DOM, a lot of them, and they perfectly know what's each one of them. So in terms of in the research settings, in the academic centers, they're now doing more randomized control trials with the placebo, like for example, lower doses of psychedelics, and they're very strict with the exclusion criteria. Absolutely no one with history or personal family history of psychosis is included. They're very thorough with doing medical evaluations before the dosings, They take careful attention to the setting, and they provide therapy before and after the dosing session. So before the dosing session, the therapist meets with the patients and they discuss, what the problems are, what their intention is. They discuss the potential for, challenging experiences, or what we call bad trips. And they talk about the possibility of, receiving placebo, and how this is not something just for them, but a greater purpose than themselves. Then they have sessions of the psychedelic experience, LSD or psilocybin, and then they integrate a couple of sessions after the insights that they gain during the psychedelic experience. This is how the room looks like. It's a very comfortable place, relaxing with a couch. They can lie down, and they're motivated to just like put the eye shades and have the attention inwards. They have music that is catered for the experience, and we're not really a therapist there. We're just supporting them. Usually they're encouraged to just like be with their mind. Whenever they need us, we're there, but we're not providing therapy. And so usually people that do this, therapists or psychiatrists or social workers, but if you're interested in participating somehow in this um, activities, there's the Center project that is a very interesting project. It's a harm reduction project because people still do psychedelics outside of the research studies. So this is a harm reduction project where they go to different festivals. Here is the Burning Man festival, and they put their tent over there. It's actually not, it looks little, but it's not so little. And they provide a safe space for the people that are having psychedelic experiences. And it's a quiet, safe space with people that are trained. They don't need to be psychiatrists or therapists, they're just trained on that. And they are actually known to decrease the need for law enforcement people there dealing with these people having a difficult experience, and they reduce the number of psychiatric hospitalizations and arrests. Usually they have also an MD or nurse or EMS in the group to like check on the health of the patient, of the people. So as I said before, most of these psychedelic experiences are resolved just with support. So it's a very, very helpful project, and you can participate. Different festivals around the US, they do this. And there are four principles that they have that are very important. One is when someone is having a bad experience or even a psychedelic experience, they need to be in a safe space, avoid noisy or crowded spaces. You talk through, you don't talk them down, right? You help that, you don't distract them from the experience, you help the person connect with what they're feeling, to explore what they're experiencing. You sit, you do not guide. So you're just a meditative calm presence, and you care for them and you kind of make them feel safe, but you don't, but you let the person what they're experiencing be the guide, not you. As they need you, you can talk to them, but you're sitting, not guiding. And also let them know that difficulty is not bad. So challenging experiences usually can be very valuable and may lead to growth and learning. And so yeah, just to understand this, difficult is not bad. I'm not going to go into much details here, unfortunately, because we don't have time, but I do want to note that the psychedelics are being explored in different fields in psychiatry to deal with death-related anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD, substance use disorders. They have done a lot of open-label trials that show that they actually improved these conditions, and now we're getting more into stage 2 trials where we do randomized blinded studies. And because the open label trials have had good results. And this is a good article that summarizes the psychedelics trials in addiction. And they have used for LSD just one single dose having better effects and less number needed to treat compared to daily naltrexone, daily acamprosate, daily disulfiram. It's also helpful for alcohol use disorder as per this open label trial from NYU. They were now doing a trial. Peyote, even though there are no trials, it's used in the Native American community, which has very big rates of alcohol use disorder. So they reimburse for the Native American community to ritual leaders that use peyote for treating alcoholism in their this label open label trial have impressive results for nicotine use disorder. 6 months after three doses, 80% of the participants were abstinent, whereas, for example, treatment with varenicline has 35%. And even after 67 months, about 60% were still abstinent. 13 of the 15 participants rated psilocybin as among the 5 most meaningful experiences of their lives. Ibogaine is a little bit different. It's supposedly reportedly very useful with opioid withdrawal, but 1980s NIDA did a study and they shut down the study because of the potential cardiotoxic and neurotoxic effects. They still have a lot of places around Mexico and Europe that use ibogaine for opioid use disorder, um, but it's not unclear the safety and so they're exploring related compounds like noribogaine and 18-MSD to to that appear to have less side effects than ibogaine. Ayahuasca, not randomized control trial yet, but several open label trials that showed some improvement in substance use disorders. This is something that a psychiatrist in Brazil wrote. Drug addiction is the process of lying to oneself, and ayahuasca is a truth medicine. What ayahuasca does is unmask how the addict has accommodated the illness. One cannot lie to oneself in ayahuasca. It will force you to see what you always ignore, and that is extremely disturbing. This becomes an opportunity for change. The awareness of how the addict is deceiving himself and how lying to oneself is precisely how one got to be addicted in the first place. This can be a dramatic shift in awareness of self that can be quite painful to endure, but with greater benefit. I don't know of a more effective way to get people to confront their true self. None of the Western medicines or methods can do this as ayahuasca does. A lot of ongoing studies right now for different psychiatric conditions. And the conclusions in terms of addiction is that one, there are robust and persistent long-term change following discrete exposure, right? 1 to 3 doses of psychedelics. Two, there's a lack of harmful effects among the study participants, showing an excellent safety profile so far. And three, the level of the ethical experience are predictive of the results. Um, and there are several obstacles, right? Right now, the studies are mostly open label trials, uncontrolled, but this is a reason to prioritize research based on the impressive results so far. Two, bad reputation of the drugs, but you have to keep the risks in context that the harms are modest relatively to most other illicit and licit substances. And it's possible that the decreased perception of risk is going to increase, the illicit use. Uh, and we have to be clear that the safety is assessed mostly on the control conditions of clinical trials. And three, relatively lack of commercial potential. So most psychedelics were discovered over half century ago, so there's not really much possibilities to patent them. So for federal funding agencies don't really um, finance these trials. It's mostly like private companies that do this. And now I want to share a couple of uh, quotes that some people wrote about their experiences with psilocybin in this smoking cessation trial. So one person wrote, I used to hide on the air conditioning unit on the side of my house when I used to smoke. And so the image was me sitting there, smoking, all hunched over, stupid, smoking, and the vine just rising up, and this purpley flower face thing looking down at me, like, how ridiculous. And then I'm not really that person, I'm really this vine. That's really me, and God is within me. How silly to think that smoking was going to do anything or solve anything. So it was really just that rising up feeling and that powerful feeling, and it just filled me with such beauty and strength and life. Another person, um, they kind of like were able to recall like suppressed memories that they have of childhood trauma that they have not previously dealt with therapeutically, and that they kind of like identify were the reason why they were smoking and other self-destructive behaviors. And one person wrote, it was me in the red coat lighting up a cigarette, and then it spread into a grid. So it was like that one cigarette was 1,000 cigarettes. And here we see the experience of interconnectedness that I've mentioned before, like oneness with the universe. I was in love with everything, in love with the couch, in love with the whole room, the people in it. Love is a pretty big distraction from addiction, and my attention kept coming back to it, that great feeling of love and acceptance. I had always had this sense of everything being interconnected, and the psilocybin session reinforced that very strongly. If I were to smoke, I would be a polluter. Ashtrays and butts all over the place, and you're causing harm to the other people's health as well. And so you were looking at your place in the universe and what you're doing to help or hinder it, the universe as such. And by smoking, you wouldn't be helping. And sometimes people said that stopping smoking was just not the for example, this person wrote, smoking just seemed like this minuscule flick of the like that. It was nothing compared to everything that I was feeling and thinking. And it was all coming together in this holistic picture of everything, past, present, future. And smoking, whatever. Like so pointless. It's just nothing to do with anything. Like a little pebble in your shoe. Just brush it off and then you know what? The world is so much bigger. And a lot of people said that well, here it's not just the psilocybin sessions, but it's the human connection and the support that comes with that human connection that ultimately leads to success at the end of the day. And a lot of people reported effects beyond smoking. So quitting smoking was definitely an important part, but for example, this person wrote, this is about a smoking study. I keep forgetting that because there's so much more that happened. Smoking just seems so petty compared to some of the stuff that was happening. So, so that there were long-term changes in the thoughts, in their affects, even 30 months after this psilocybin session. Um, so this is an image of several of the people that are doing research around the world in psychedelics, and also like two of the shamans in Mexico and South America. And that's it. Questions?
That was excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Franco. We'll open the floor to questions. Feel free to either type your questions in the question box and I can relay it, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you.
Oh, hello?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw that you weren't able to hear me.
That's okay. We got most of it. They were breaking up a little bit, but
Oh
I
no.
think we were able to hear most of it. So, Dr. Franco, last time you and I had met in New York City, you were about to be in one of these sessions. Can you tell us a little, are you able to talk a little bit about that session you observed and tell us a
Yes.
little bit about what your observation was?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So again, I'm sorry I didn't check the text that you were sending me. That the connection was not so good. So I was participating on the trial at NYU of psilocybin for major depressive disorder, and that unfortunately had to be halted due to the COVID. But we were recruiting participants that had been experiencing depression for at least 3 months, and we were randomizing them either to psilocybin or to niacin, which is a doesn't really have psychedelic effects, but it causes like some sort of flushing and tingling. Um, and just for you to know, sometimes people experience psychedelic effects without like during the placebo because of the suggestion ability. So what we do is before the sessions, we meet with the patient at least 3 times, and we discuss, what their intentions are for the session. We get to know them, and then during the session, we have a kind of like a bowl, like a ceremonial bowl, where we have the pill that can be either placebo or the psilocybin in a capsule. and they can bring like personal items like a picture or diary or whatever they want to with them. They put their hearing, um, the things where you listen to music, and they we cater the music for them, music that kind of is introspective. It's a standardized music program for all the participants, and we mostly encourage them to be with the experience, be with the drug, and to focus their attention inwards. And they have eye shades, and the sessions can range from not very exciting like if patients are sometimes, let's say, tripping a lot, and they just like stay there lying on their couch most of the time, experiencing these psychedelic effects and enjoying the music and having insights and seeing whatever their distortions of the things they're having, because with the eyes closed they still have visual disturbances with the eyes closed. In fact, it's more intense when the eyes are closed. This can range to the participant wanting to talk. For example, the one that I had, he wanted to talk, but he couldn't because um, he was having a lot of a strong psychedelic experience, so he wanted, but he was just not really able, so he just went to lie down. Um, the people that receive placebo, they usually feel disappointed, so they kind of like want to talk more, but we still encourage them to just be with the experience, lie down on the couch, because we don't want to give them more therapy, because this will be a confounder. And I haven't experienced this, but my mentor, Dr. Ross, have told me that he has had sessions where the participants really get kind of um, they act out a little bit more, and there's a big painting of a ocean on top of that couch, and then one person kind of like was on top of the couch and wanted to dive into the painting, um, or he went with him to the bathroom and the participant was actually hugging the toilet. So I haven't really seen this, but there are a couple of interesting stories that other researchers have shared. So it really varies. Um, but most of them, participants just lying down, enjoying the experience. Most of them are really calm. Um, and it's very rarely that we need like any rescue medication like benzos. Their anxiety.
How long are the sessions?
The sessions are about 6 to 8 hours, and they need to, yeah, they cannot leave before hour 8, because we want to make sure that all the effects have subsided. So we don't want to, I mean, we would release them home once all the effects subsided, and we discharge them with a family member that has to pick them up.
Mhm. And you mentioned that exclusion criteria include his personal or family history of psychosis, right?
Yeah.
And are there also exclusion criteria for current serotonergic agent administration, like antidepressants and?
For the depression study, most of them happen to be in certain antidepressants. So what we were, not all of them, some of them. So what we would do was that we would taper them off medications, and we would wait a little bit, and then we would do the sessions. Like it needs a couple of weeks for them to be off of the antidepressants, um, to be able to receive. It's very rare, this serotonin syndrome. I don't think I've seen much like case reports, but it's very rare. But if it happens, it can be deadly. So we don't want to take the chances. Um,
Gotcha, makes sense.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that makes sense. It just I can imagine that that would be a difficult thing to address. So we have a comment here from Lauren Murphy. Dr. Corso, phenomenal lecture. Thank you for sharing. I have a question about the treatment for depression. After treatment with the psychedelic, is the SSRI or SNRI restarted? Dr. Corso, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me, Sylvia? I think we might have lost Sylvia. And Lauren, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. Let's see. Lauren, can you hear me?
Hear
Yeah.
you.
Hey. Yeah,
Also,
I think we lost Sylvia, which is a bummer. I can shoot her an email and then send you a response to. I actually had the same question as to whether or not they would restart it and how long afterwards. But I'll try to get you an answer. But I think since we lost our presenter, thank God it was right at the end. We'll end our session and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, my connection was lost. Can you hear me?
We got you back. Great. Did you hear the question?
No.
Okay, the question is phenomenal lecture. Thank you for sharing. Do you, after treatment with the psychedelic, is the SSRI or SNRI restarted?
Oh, if after the psychedelic they would restart this?
Mm-hmm.
Usually the studies have a timeline, right? So for example, our study was short term, so just for 3 months. So during those 3 months, they cannot start any other medication. There are studies that do like longer follow-up, like 1 year. So during that time, they should not start any other medication. But after the time is over, they can start whatever they need. But then they usually provide access to therapists in the from the study, etc. But they try to kind of like standardize that people don't receive more therapy than others. If the people happen to like really worsen, then they can start whatever they need. Um, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you still.
All right, then.
Did anybody have? All right. I don't see anybody else speaking up. So again, Dr. Franco, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. It was even better the second time. And we'll see you all next month at or 2 months from now in ACMT Grand Rounds. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation.